James Borrego's first game as Pelicans head coach ended in a loss, but this wasn't the same old Pelicans, and that actually could change the trajectory of the season. It's Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Monday. We are starting a new era here as interim head coach James Borrego coached his first game for the Pelicans, and they lost. But this wasn't the same old Pelicans. This was not new coach, same result. They looked different. I want to break down what we saw from the Pelicans in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 11,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And don't forget, you can watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. And become an everydayer. It means you listen Monday through Friday to the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Again, we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the #1 sports podcast network. So this was not the same old Pelicans. You know, they might have lost. And they did in kind of pretty bad fashion. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot to not like too. But look, they only lost the third quarter by 2 points. That's a big difference. At times, they straight up out-executed the Golden State Warriors, and it was really that first quarter where New Orleans really struggled, and they seemed to kind of get back into this game, and I think that's an important thing. By the way, today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. So let's get into this. You know, this felt different. Well, yes, the result was the same here. I do think that this was a very different Pelicans team that you saw out there on the court. Frankly, the vibes were just different. You felt them compete more in this game. You know, on offense, there was, at least on offense, there was better energy, better vibes. And James Borrego made his first change. Derik Queen starting. No Kevon Looney in this game at all. This is not the same Pelicans team that we saw on Friday. The body language on Friday was absolutely atrocious, absolutely abysmal. In the last 2 shows I've done, I've said that might be the worst I've ever seen the team just physically look out there on the court. And before the game, I asked James Borrego what his expectations were for this team, and he said he was focused on lifting up their spirits, lifting up their heads, finding joy in playing, having some fun in playing, and that he wasn't as worried about execution as much. This was a group that just needed a morale boost, and he wanted to try and provide that, and the goal was to kind of accomplish that. There are a lot of tweaks that you are going to see from this Pelicans team. I've talked to the coaching staff there and others around the team, and there will be bigger changes coming. But James Borrego has basically had 1.5 practices with this squad. You can't change it overnight like that, but they're starting to change what they can, starting with Derik Queen, in the starting lineup and just kind of playing with a little bit more force. The phrase you will hear from James Borrego is speed and violence. He likes saying that here. And you saw a team that got down early, as many as 17 in the first half, and got this to under 5 points right before halftime, before, really falling apart at that point and kind of giving up the end of the first half, about 1:30, with bad execution. But you saw some fight and some spirit in this team that you just have not seen out there. So if his goal was to kind of lift their spirits and do all of that, compare their body language on the court in this game to what you saw on Friday, and he definitely accomplished that, even if the result, a loss, isn't exactly what we wanted. But this is the step in the direction that the Pelicans need to go. The vibes just needed to change around the team. And look, not everyone wanted Willie Green gone in terms of players. There were some players, I can tell you this for certain, that liked Willie Green and that this was a bit of a shock to him too. So you're navigating a tricky situation, but to come out and just play with energy, I think is a really important thing. I think that was the most important thing, and this team does seem to kind of have some team spirit that really seemed to be lacking on Friday here. They kept battling. Execution will come later, but they needed to have that kind of competitiveness that you just haven't seen. Were certain things bad? Yeah, rebounding was bad. We'll talk about that in a little bit. 3-point shooting was not great. Turnovers were rough, but you at least saw them fight. And that's better than all those things in no fight from this team. One of the things that you saw from them was them being very aggressive in this game. The officiating was kind of weird, I would say, but the Pelicans got to the free throw line significantly more than the Golden State Warriors, 29 times to 17 times. That speaks to that aggression, that aggressiveness, the violence, in a sense, that James Borrego wants to see from this team. And if you actually look at it in terms of offensive efficiency in the half court, the Pelicans out-executed the Golden State Warriors in half-court situations. Transition was a different story. And when New Orleans was turning over the ball, there were some really bad turnovers, unforced errors at times too, that gifted easy transition points to the Golden State Warriors. And I wouldn't say their offensive execution in the first half was good. They just out-executed the Golden State Warriors in the half court. Transition has not been great for New Orleans. You saw them blow multiple transition opportunities here. Those are things that you can actually clean up pretty easily. And so this group, from talking to people around the team, feel they can really get back into the hunt for the play-in tournament. It's a rough stretch of games right now. Golden State Warriors, followed by the Oklahoma City Thunder, then the Denver Nuggets on Wednesday. This is why you might have wanted to make that Willie Green decision earlier so that Borrego could be 2 or 3 games into his tenure here with more of the changes he wants to see. But I guess you have to start somewhere, and you at least saw the start of it. Now, it might not actually turn into anything. This could be a players thing where these guys it's not going to work. That is a very valid thing to question right now when you see this game. But James Borrego is the head coach, so he's going to have the opportunity to do this, and we'll evaluate it. And I'm not saying he should be the head coach, next season or anything like that. In fact, they should do a massive search unless you really see Borrego come in and completely change the fortunes of this team. It's still going to be a work in progress. It's going to take some time, and I think the goal is to be competitive by the end of the season and maybe be in the play-in tournament hunt at that point in time. In the Western Conference, it looks like there are opportunities, at least right now, and it's early, so who knows, for that to be the case. But you just saw this team look better is the best thing. Like, this goes beyond the box score. If you look at, on NBA.com and just look at the box score and look at some of the stats, you're going to be like, this is terrible, right? No, it really wasn't. It really wasn't. You could see it from this team, the way that they kind of ground the Warriors down in the second quarter in particular, winning that quarter, in a weird way, right? Both teams not executing well, but holding the Golden State Warriors to 17 points in the second quarter after giving up 44 in the first quarter. It's not great, but that's an improvement. You saw them really fight against Golden State in this, and if you took it outside of the first quarter, this game was pretty close. I'll take that from this team right now, given where they were. Now, the bar's low, right? So it's not like I'm saying they're a good team or anything like that. The bar's low, but they've cleared at least that low bar, in my opinion, which, look, they were not doing that beforehand. So I think that is something to really look at and be happy about with this team. It does feel a little bit different. The vibes are different around the team. That was the first step of what James Borrego is trying to do. He succeeded in that. Let's see now if he can start changing the on-court stuff a little bit more so than that. Look, you even saw it with some of the turnovers. New Orleans had 19 turnovers in this game, and some of them were not great. But some of these were like audacious passes from guys like Derik Queen or Jeremiah Fears, a couple lobs that didn't go well. This was a team that was kind of trying to have some more fun with what they were doing. Some of those lob attempts were pretty great and a little too aggressive. Borrego wanted them to play with speed and violence, right? And you saw a team, and he said this after the fact too, that was a little bit too wound up. I was tweeting about it during the game. I was like, this team's playing too fast. They're a little bit too out of control. But that can be fun for those kind of players. They're out there and they're just trying to do things, and they're just moving so quickly. They'll get settled. Things will slow down a little bit. They'll still be able to play fast, but a little bit more under control. And that's going to go a really long way towards, one, cutting down on those turnovers, but also having them win games too. Borrego said that as much. That's almost to be expected, where he's trying to kind of have them play a slightly different style than what they're used to. They haven't really had tons of practice playing fast, let's say. It's going to lead to turnovers. It's going to lead to some of those out of control moments, but these players seem to respond to at least try and do that. If Willie Green was asking him to do things in his tenure this year, they weren't doing that, clearly. They were tuning him out. They're not tuning Borrego out. If you want to try and turn the season around, That's a good starting point for that sort of thing. So that's why I watched this game, and I would say I'm encouraged. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm optimistic that they are going to turn it around. I don't really think that. But you can at least see something there. And that's an important thing. Coming up next, one thing that was not there was defensive rebounding. I want to break that down, and I don't know if that's going to get better anytime soon, but there's one thing about it that maybe you feel could change. It's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, every day. Locking in on every opening, beating your PR, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and EFTs, options, futures, and crypto all on one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here. It's a new era, it feels like, for the Pelicans, and nothing beats being in the arena for these games. But buying tickets can be a headache, and that's why Game Time is my go-to ticketing app. No surprise fees, no prices that jump right before checkout. It's just easy to buy tickets. That's what Game Time does. This is my go-to ticketing app. When people want Pelicans tickets, I just tell them to go use Game Time. I actually used it to just buy like a block of tickets for Wednesday's game against the Denver Nuggets. You can just get great seats in minutes. It's a couple of taps and boom, there are your tickets. And if you're going to a venue you've never been before, you can see the seat view in the app before you buy. And there's zone deals, a game changer. You pick the section, Game Time picks your seats, and you save big. Take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. You can also watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. We are part of Spaced Out There. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, the #1 sports podcast network. Starting next week, I'm on honeymoon, getting married on Saturday, and going on the honeymoon, and Dilly Sanders is going to be here kind of taking over for the next 3 weeks or so. I'll be back on December 15th. You'll be in great hands with him. You've seen him a lot on the show recently. He flew solo on Friday as well. So give him a lot of love. He's going to be taking over. We may have time to get him on the show one more time this week before. It's a kind of crazy week. We'll see. But I'm excited for him to kind of have a little bit of run with the show and just take a break from everything. I'm looking forward to actually unplugging for truthfully maybe the first time in my life. But we're not unplugging yet. I'm here this week. I'm going to be watching the games. I'm excited to be there. I'm going to be at everything this week up until the wedding. So I want to keep talking about the Pelicans game against the Golden State Warriors, losing here in James Borrego's first game, 124-106. One of the issues in this game was defense and defensive rebounding. The defense has been really atrocious all year long for New Orleans. It was no different in this game. They were not good. There were too many times these guys were not on the same page, and this does need to change here. And this is going to be one of the challenges for James Borrego. I'm going to be curious to see what he does with this team and how he kind of gets these guys to compete on defense. That was a big issue in the Lakers game. The Lakers didn't look particularly great, but this team was just not trying on the defensive side of the ball. And that was at times it was different, I would say, in this one. They were trying on defense, but they just didn't know what to be doing. And so they need to get these guys on the same page. Too many times someone was just left wide open under the basket. There was a defensive miscommunication in the second half where they just left Steph Curry wide open for three. This isn't going to work. This is a game that I find particularly disappointing to lose because Steph Curry was basically like a non-factor, it felt like. He was 2 of 11 in this game for 9 total points. He was not good. Herb Jones, for all the people saying Herb Jones shouldn't be starting, you should put him on the bench. This was a Herb Jones defensive masterclass. Yes, Herb Jones only had 6 points. He was 2 of 7, 0 for 3 from deep. But the defense that he provided there was insane on Steph Curry. Limiting Steph Curry, bothering Steph Curry, doing all of that. He was the one guy in this game that was like really, really good defensively, in my opinion. Overall, Trey did pretty good too. He had 4 steals in this one and was active in poking the ball loose in the passing lanes. But Herb Jones, what he was doing to Steph Curry was truly incredible, in my opinion. This is one of the worst Steph Curry games I've seen, and Steph Curry's coming off of a bunch of heaters right now. He looks incredible, and New Orleans limited him. But you still lost because the other guys on the team really weren't stepping up and able to provide what you needed here. You know, Derik Queen, I thought, was good enough defensively. Yves Missi coming in off the bench, I thought was trying to do what he could, but they've got a defensive rebound here. And that's kind of what this comes down to. You know, they forced misses. They forced misses here, but they gave up 16 offensive boards. And I'm not even going to look at the second chance points here because it doesn't matter. It's the effort that goes into it. You work so hard to force a miss, and then they get the ball right back and get another opportunity. That's one, demoralizing to a team, but also what it's doing is it means you're working double as hard those possessions on defense. You get the offense, they get the offensive board, and you've got to go back and defend all that again to try and force a miss. That wears on you over the course of a game. You know, by the time you hit late in the third, the start of the fourth quarter, some of these guys are tired because they've been hustling on defense so much. And you're not getting anything to show from it. And that's what's disappointing here. This is a team that needs to figure out how to defensive rebound. Derik Queen, 7 defensive boards, fine. But Yves Missi coming in off the bench. And look, this was a big part of the changes that James Borrego was bringing. No Kevon Looney in this game. You know, I got told over the weekend that you would not see Kevon Looney probably going forward here. This is one of the first big changes, experiments, let's call it, from James Borrego. No Looney in this one. The big man rotation was going to be Derik Queen, Yves Missi, and Carlo Makovic. But Missi looks good with 7 rebounds, except one of them is a defensive board. He has not been a very good defensive rebounder. He absolutely needs to. Carlo in this game had a defensive rebounding percentage of 4.8. That is abysmal. That's worse than most guards. He was a non-factor on the defensive glass when he was out there. He had 1 defensive rebound. Derik Queen was at 22.5%. That's better, but that's not a good number. You need guys to be in the high 20s here. This is a team that needs to figure out how to defensive rebound as a group. And in this game, you did see a lot of them just standing around and not putting forth the effort on that. They were trying. That's why I said in the open of the show, the effort was there on offense. It wasn't there as much on defense, particularly when it came to team rebounding. And they're going to need to do that because there isn't an easy answer here. Zion Williamson is close to coming back, and he's likely going to start in the front court alongside Derik Queen. I wouldn't be shocked if you see a starting lineup of Jeremiah Fears, Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, Zion Williamson, and Derik Queen. I'm actually very intrigued to see that lineup, truthfully. But are they going to be able to rebound? And that's kind of the big question here. They're going to need to commit to this. By committing on defensive rebounding, you can't get out in transition and run as much because you need guys back. So if you commit to team defensive rebounding, it hurts you on that side of in terms of transition offense. You're going to need to find a way to balance this sort of thing here. And I don't know what they're going to do. The good news is, look, they're playing with more effort. They're playing with more energy. Maybe that means you can do a lot of this, but this team absolutely needs to find a way to defensive rebound better. It's going to give you more energy late. It's going to give you more energy late, which will lead to better offensive execution if you're not spending all of that energy on defense. And that's what they're doing right now, to force a miss. And then now let's go and do it again. And eventually you run out of steam, and it's going to lead to second chance points. It's going to lead to offensive boards, and you're going to lose the game. And that has been a problem for New Orleans. This is something that if James Borrego can figure out will be a big kind of thing in his corner if he, for when they're evaluating him for this job full time and not just on an interim basis. That's going to be massively important. Trey was good defensive rebounding here. He had 7 of these in this game. I thought he was good in this game overall. even if the three-point shot wasn't falling as much. 20 points, 8 rebounds, 2 assists, 4 steals. Those are good numbers there, and getting to the line too. But this is as a team is going to need to figure out how to try and do this, particularly with some of the guys on the second unit. Those rebounding numbers absolutely have to be better. In this game, I think the Pelicans had a defensive rebounding percentage of 60%. That's not going to work. That's not going to work at all. Where did the percentage go? Yeah, 60.8%, so 61%. It needs to be like 75% or better. You gave up almost 40% of available, basically almost 40% of Golden State Warriors misses ended up as an offensive board. Like that's going to kill you, and it's going to hurt you in other aspects of the game. That's why getting the defensive rebounding under control is so important. Coming up, let's look at Derik Queen. His minutes were a little bit weird. Jeremiah Fears' minutes were a little bit weird. I'm going to explain what's going on there. That's coming up in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride a hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. You could even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout, and it keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Maybe the Pelicans will start doing that. That would be awesome. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Again, that is $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That is the best offer that I have heard of from FanDuel over at FanDuel.com. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. And become an everydayer means you listen Monday through Friday to Locked On Pelicans. It's also okay if you're not an everydayer. I appreciate you just tuning in wherever and however it is that you do. So let's keep talking here about we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Also make Locked On Saints your second listen, a bye week for the Saints, but big kind of second part of the season coming up. Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints is going to break it down. So weird minutes in this game for Derik Queen. This is the fewest he's played in a little while here. 24 and a half minutes, kind of a different bit of a rotation here. This was a little bit of like trial by fire for him. Draymond Green is a tough guy to defend you in your first start. Played well overall, 7 rebounds, 6 assists is pretty good, 2 blocks. The scoring wasn't there. They didn't quite use him as much as they wanted to offensively, and I think that was, as I said earlier, they were playing too fast, a little bit too wound up, where they were just kind of going, and weren't running some offensive sets like I think James Borrego wanted them to do. You saw them at times just almost being too aggressive. But that's something that can be worked on over time when Borrego has more time with these guys with more practices. So I think you'll see that get a little bit better here. I think this has more to do with just the weird matchup than him not being in the rotation or anything like that, or a shifting role. That's truly my read on it here. I think he'll be starting. I'm going to be very curious what it'll look like when Zion Williamson comes back. Borrego has kind of said he wants to stick with things for 5 to 10 games to truly see what works, get enough data on certain lineups, certain roles for guys. I would imagine Derik Queen is the starting center for the foreseeable future. Maybe not over the course of the season, but I think he's going to want to see that pairing with Derik Queen at center, Zion Williamson at forward instead of Saddiq Bey, then Jeremiah Fears, Herb Jones, and Trey Murphy. I'm curious too. I don't know if it's going to work, but at least you're starting to figure some of this out. If you realize Zion Williamson and Derik Queen just can't coexist together, and that was a lot of the concern pre-draft, at least you'll know, and that can inform some of the decisions of the front office and how you approach things going forward with this team, which will be an important thing to try and do. Jeremiah Fears, mixed game in this one, 17 points, that's good, 5 of 17, I'm moving too fast in today's show. 7 of 15 shooting, 5 rebounds, just 1 assist. In this one, a couple of weird turnovers as well. Again, playing fast. This is the kind of style that can really suit him. You still see the lead guard potential in him, and some of the moves he had getting to the basket I thought were excellent in this game. For both rookies, it's going to be a work in progress at times. They're going to have good games. They're going to have bad games. They're going to have just kind of blah games. It's fine. This is part of the process. These are the guys you're developing, and I think we've seen enough from them early on to feel confident about them here. I'm going to be curious about how they use Yves Missi going forward. We kind of talked a little bit about it in the last segment here. He's got to get better as a defensive rebounder. I'm glad they committed to him in this game. Again, I think he will be the first big man off the bench. See kind of what role he plays. Same for Carlo. He brings energy. He brings a lot of energy when he steps onto the court. And you see the athleticism at times. But if he can be a solid defensive rebounder, he will carve out a bigger role. Otherwise, I think he's kind of like stuck where he is. You saw some Bryce McGowan minutes in this one. We haven't really seen that at all this season. Thought he did overall kind of well. They're still waiting just for Jordan Poole to come back. I think he's going to take a lot of those Jordan Hawkins, Bryce McGowan minutes combined between them. They played about 27 minutes. Given the blowout, that kind of impacted some of the stuff here too. But you would imagine Poole will have that kind of role when it comes to it. Jose Alvarado did great off the bench in this game, just truly being kind of that energy guy. 3 of 8 shooting from deep. That'll work 18 points on the night. It's just a work in progress, y'all. This is a coach who they ran through like a kind of semi-practice before the game that was closed off to the media. You often see that when they're just trying to kind of get some extra time in, install some things. That's why some changes are coming. I'm sure they'll keep doing that going forward right now. Also why maybe you should have made the move to Borrego earlier so that he would have time to kind of install some of this stuff. But they do want to make some bigger changes. And I think Borrego's got a vision for it. I've seen a lot of people say like, well, Borrego's just part of the problem. He was there with Willie Green. And to an extent, yes, but Willie Green is the head coach and is making a lot of these decisions when it comes to it. And now it's Borrego's turn to be able to do that. So he probably does have a different approach, probably viewed some things differently, to what degree, I don't know, than head coach Willie Green. But now it's his opportunity to kind of remake the Pelicans as much as he can during the season in his own vision for it. So that's going to do it for this episode of Locked On Pelicans. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and the #1 sports podcast network. Be back with y'all tomorrow to talk about the OKC game.